All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you. It's Thursday. I know I called the program Total Eclipse Monday. Maybe that was a mistake. Because it's not Monday today. Today is Thursday. I called it Total Eclipse Monday because Monday is the day of the total eclipse. I wanted to kind of discuss something a little less depressing, at least to start out with, come up with a topic that isn't quite as I don't know, awful, right? As the endless war, the climate catastrophe that we've created for ourselves, and worse than for ourselves, for our children, their children, all the animals, the non-human animals on the planet that are blameless, right? And they're not, and our kids, some of them will get some of the benefits from burning fossil fuels. The animals just get dead. So let's start with something, at least it's not depressing, I don't think. I don't think the eclipse is depressing. It's kind of cool, right? I mean, every now and then the moon passes right in front of the sun in different parts of the world. And I always used to think, well, shouldn't there be a total eclipse, or shouldn't there be an eclipse like every day or something, or whatever, every month when there's a new moon? Okay, so the eclipse happens when the moon goes directly between the earth and the sun. And I'm like, but every time there's a new moon, there's the earth, the moon is between the earth and the sun. Because you don't see the moon if it's between the sun and the earth, right? Because that's daytime, right? So I was like, well, that's a new moon? So I'm like, well, there's always going to be an eclipse. But it turns out no, because the Earth, the moon, and the sun aren't always right on the same line, right? They're on different lines. But every now and then, the path of the moon comes directly between the Earth and the sun. Or is it the other way around? Maybe the moon blots out the sun just for a few minutes. So cool, right? Yeah, I guess so. So the Mayans, I was in Mexico, they understood all this, kind of, I guess. I don't know if they really understood exactly what was happening, but they could predict it because they kept really good calendar records, and they were I don't know fully how much they understood. For example, they thought the Earth was, I asked our guide, I said, did they understand the way the solar system works? Did they, for example, the Mayans, think maybe the sun was the center of the universe, which at least would be recognition if the sun, and obviously the sun isn't the center of the universe, but up until, I guess, 1,000 or so years ago, maybe Galileo, I'm not really even clear, when the Europeans got right that the Earth orbited the sun. I'm not really clear on that. I was wondering if the Mayans, whose civilization really reached its apogee around 900, between 6 and 900 AD, did they get right? Did they understand that the sun at least was the center of a solar system, or maybe of the universe, which would be, I guess, an advance over the Europeans who thought the Earth was the center, and it was Kepler and Galileo and others who disabused us of that notion. But apparently, at least the guide, who I think he seemed super knowledgeable, I'm sure he knew what he was talking about, said no, the Mayans did think the Earth was the center of the universe. They didn't think, that the Earth orbited the sun. So they had the same misunderstanding of that critical aspect of astronomy as the Europeans did at the time. They thought the Earth was the center, but by virtue of their remarkably detailed record keeping, their mathematical skills in terms of predicting, and they understood, and I don't know if Europeans did exactly how long a year was. They could predict eclipses with great accuracy. And I'll get into why that, what they did with that knowledge in a moment. It's kind of interesting and tells you, I think, a lot about just human beings, right? That it doesn't matter we hear and we do criticize, of course, my European ancestors, not so much mine. I mean, they were living in poor Jewish communities. They didn't have a lot of power, but the European elites for colonialism, for persecuting, for enslaving, for massacring, for genocide, and rightly so. But it's not as though these civilizations that they often destroyed, and they didn't destroy. The Europeans did not destroy the Mayan civilization. Mayans died out before the Spanish conquistadores landed in Mexico. It was already gone. The civilization had already collapsed, perhaps because of climate change, drought, heat. The Mayans didn't die out. The descendants of Mayans live in Mexico. Many did die, but they could no longer sustain cities. They could no longer sustain an elite of kings and priests and aristocrats who didn't work, basically, if you had to find your own food, and many didn't. So the cities collapsed. But there were a lot of really negative aspects, right, to Mayan and Aztec culture. Mayans did practice human sacrifice. At least some of the city-states did. I believe so did the Aztecs. And they weren't these enlightened, kindly, wonderful people. They were human beings like all of us with positive and negative traits. We'll get into what the eclipse means in a moment, but let me just show you this, the path of totality here. It's kind of a cool video I found, so I thought I'd show it. Why not? And I reached out to some friends of mine who live right in the path of totality, and they said, "Oh, come visit us." And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a bit of a trek. By the way, Halitics, text me, don't text me. Call me right now. It's just after 1 Eastern time on Thursday, 240-283. No, let me get the number right. 240-242-5646. Please do. I was contacted by somebody who helps promote live streamers on YouTube, and really he, I believe, focuses on search engine optimization. I'm not sure how that helps with live. Anyway, the contact said, you do a great product, you have a great product, but your reach is weak, and I can help you with that. I'm really considering it. I know there are folks who help with that, but I just thought I'd mention that and see if the gentleman, I believe, again, man, is watching. But I really only want to work with someone to the extent of promoting this live stream. I only want to work with somebody who really likes what I'm doing, already admires it, or if they don't like it, have ideas for how to make it better, but want to be part of what I'm doing here. So you don't have to think I'm great, but I want you to want to be part of this project, which is, again, to bring people together, to have a community center where we can talk about, focus on the issues that challenge, that we're challenged by. This is something that really frustrates me. Oftentimes people will criticize my proposals, my solutions, but they don't come up with their own. So I had this online debate with a friend about homelessness, and specifically homeless children. And this individual was, poking huge holes, or thought they were, in what I was proposing. And I said, well, then what do you think we should do? This is a crisis, a moral crisis, just like the war in Israel that we're supporting. And really, it's the genocide by Israel that we're supporting. These are moral crises. We have to do something about it. If you don't think my solution is going to work, if you don't think it's useful, if you don't think it's politically palatable, then what do you propose? It's not enough to simply say, well, what you want to do isn't going to work. It's not enough to say raising a tax on fossil fuels isn't going to work if you don't come up with an alternative. So that's what this program's about. That's what this community bulletin board center is about, is coming together and trying to come up with solutions, coming to some sort of consensus, and then really pushing for them. Here's the path of totality. And it's going to slow down every now and then or stop. So there you go, right over Texas. Now, it's again, I was in Mexico, and people said, well, you're going to be in Mexico. Is there going to be the eclipse? And I'm like, no, the eclipse is going to be after we come back, and it's not going to be in that part of Mexico. Mexico is a huge country. Not as big as the United States, but really, really big. So I don't think where we were in Merida, I'm sure they'll have a little, maybe, because I do, you can look at the path, and I'll show it at the end, where I am. No, it won't. I'll show you where we were on the map when we get to the end. It's not gonna hit where we were. And you can see all the way through Texas there. It's right on the Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas line. Slow there, it stops. It doesn't really stop. It just, I guess, want to highlight certain cities, hot springs, and so on. Very interesting, and obviously, if you're right in the center, the eclipse goes on for the longest period of time. You have the full eclipse. If you're at the edges of this map, you'll just have a brief moment where the sun is completely blotted out, and then mostly you'll just have partly blotted out. You should wear glasses, they say, special glasses, except you're right in the center. I always thought wherever. So there, let me just stop it there. So that's Erie. So yeah, friend in Cleveland, she'll be completely, she'll see the sun blotted out if she wants. She said, though, the problem is it's often very cloudy in Cleveland at that time of year. I think it's always cloudy in Cleveland. Let me see if I can I want to go back because I also have a friend in Indiana near Indianapolis. And so there's Indiana, and let me just stop it. So as I mentioned, two good friends are going to be right there in the path of totality. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to visit them, but maybe not. And then here we go over Cleveland, as you can see at the top of the map, and then over northwestern Pennsylvania into New York State and across the northern tier and on and on. By the way, now's an opportunity, if you're bored by this, subscribe. Yeah, go ahead, subscribe to my live stream. I need all the subscribers I can get. And there we go. The video is just about ending, as you can see, crossing into Canada, but an enormous path of totality. And I was down at if you look at that map, right where there's, well, you see the tip of Cuba pointing towards Yucatan in Mexico. That's right where I was. So just outside, it looks like any eclipse whatsoever. And Maryland, if you look at that map, we'll just get a little bit of it, but at least we'll get some of it. So I'm kind of psyched. I find these events exciting, interesting, add a little spice of life. And you can see that Mayan head, I don't know how accurate it is, how authentic it is. It looks cool. I put it there on my wall right below the image that was done by really well-known Carmel cartoonist who I really appreciated. He did that for me. It's Burns, right? That's the guy's name. And now I can't even, it's been so many years. I know he died when I was out there in Monterey. He was a big fan of the program, and he did that wonderful caricature of me. So I appreciate that. Anyway, right below it, you can see the Mayan helmet. And we'll get into what exactly the Mayans did with the knowledge of the eclipses. And, you know, let me see, Carmel cartoonist Burns. So it wasn't Burns. By the way, if you're listening, if you're watching, give me a call. Because now it's really bad, and I'm trying to see exactly. I can see actually the little script there, of his signature. I know Hank Ketchum was really famous, right? Bill Bates. I said Burns. Bill Bates, right? Bill Bates, yeah. Bill, great guy. Came to visit me when I was in the hospital. I actually visited him as well, but when he was sick. Yeah, Bill, thank you. So the Mayans. The Mayans got, oh, well, now let's just get into the priesthood. I was going to talk about what like Western, what we do now with this information is really interesting. It's scientists are very curious how are animals going to react, and they must have checked into that before. But as I mentioned, so this is from History Unplugged, and there's the little caption. I just found this online, but I wanted to kind of prove the point I was going to make, and that obviously the Mayans knew, and they could predict exactly when there would be eclipses, and there it is. Priests were very skilled at math and astronomy. So what did the priests do with that knowledge? Well, they would time their religious ceremonies to coincide with when there was going to be an eclipse. And they wouldn't they wouldn't explain to the peasants, the farmers, the riffraff, that this is a normal astronomical event. They would say, the gods are angry, you're not obeying your priests, your king. We need complete, subservience. And I'm going to have to ask the gods to close, shut down the sun, to darken the sun. You're not growing enough grain. You're not paying your taxes. And then they would wave their batons in the air and their sticks and their stakes, and to coincide exactly when the sun would start to be blotted out. And of course, this would have a real impact. People would be scared. Oh my God, we better do what the priest says. He's got the power to blot out the sun. So it was a way for the elites, the influencers, the powerful, the knowledgeable, right? Because they had the knowledge to solidify, to maintain their control, their grip over Mayan culture. We see exactly the same, of course, today with elites, newspapers telling you what they want you to know, not what maybe you want to know, telling you what you need to do, keeping you in vital information. That's basically what we saw the Mayans do. It hasn't changed. It's sad. I mean, that's kind of why I'm here. This knowledge, right? What we know, how we know it, is very important. And one of the big stories, I think it's really important. By the way, I'm going to get to Israel, but I want to just talk a little bit about Baltimore. Obviously, it's terrible what happened there, and we're looking at this, perhaps the greatest, according to the Baltimore Sun, and they should know, could be the largest maritime loss ever. And I really want to make this about globalization. This is globalism. This is the very, very tight supply chains. This is all about having one source or, limited sources across the planet for various goods and services. And because of that, rather than having many different suppliers throughout the country, and preferably for the items, the goods, the services that are consumed in the Mid-Atlantic region, or even in Maryland, more specifically in Maryland, rather than having suppliers throughout this region where I live, often the supplies are coming from thousands and thousands of miles away in these enormous ships. And you can see that container ship there. Let me see if I can zoom in on it in a moment. But that's why we have these that's a major reason there are these enormous ships, is because we don't have lots of suppliers from lots of different places. We have a couple of suppliers from a couple of places, and they're bringing items, enormous gobs. And this is a 3-football field long ship. It's as big as that bridge, and it just toppled it over completely. You can see how high, by the way, all those containers are. This is what globalism does. It makes us completely dependent for certain services and certain goods on one or two suppliers. It means that there's more and more and more coming in from those suppliers into smaller and smaller, narrower spaces, rather than, having lots of different output spots. There's one central input, in this case, Baltimore, and that's a hub, and everything congests there. And if it collapses, if something happens, and it's more likely to, the costs are astronomical. Globalism is a disaster. You can see it. And I saw some pretty cool, pretty prescient cartoons, and explaining this exactly, with the giant container ship representing globalism and the bridge representing our infrastructure. We've got to move away. I'm going to talk a lot about why I don't believe you should vote for Joe Biden. This is one of the reasons. This guy is a globalist. He talks a lot about Joe from Scranton, right? But where's the beef? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence that he really gets that we need to build in the United States? We need to move forcibly away from an import-based economy. I don't hear him talk. I know. And, my son said to me, and I looked into this, and he was right. He said, Biden didn't get rid of the Trump tariffs. He didn't wipe them out. And I was pleased. I was like, wow, that's good. But why isn't he talking about that? Why isn't he talking about Buy American? Why isn't he talking about Build American? Why isn't he talking about we need much higher? We still run enormous trade deficits. He isn't talking about raising tariffs. Trump is. This is not to extol Trump. This is the point, is that Biden is not somebody that we should be supporting. And this is an example, a very, very powerful, meaningful example. This is liberal. This is trade liberalization. This is neoliberal economy right there. An enormous container ship from the Far East, where workers are paid often $1 or less an hour, just ripping apart this important bridge, this critical bridge. That's what we're doing. That's the neoliberal economy that Democrats and Republicans have built. We cannot afford this. Our children can't afford this. It's just not sustainable. And there's so many problems with it. It's not just that destruction that you see in front of you. This is a huge driver of the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust. All those ships ripping up, tearing up the Pacific, the diesel container ships, filthy, spewing diesel smoke into the atmosphere. There's just nothing good about this, except for the consumer. You get a little bit of a cheaper price. But the costs are so astronomical that they're more than offset. They more than offset the slight consumer benefit. I fear, though, that too many people are just too, afraid of any, and we've been made this way because change usually hurts us. The changes that the elites in both parties have promoted over the decades, since the 60s, I'd say, have on balance been bad. So most people are thinking, well, if we try to change what we have now, maybe it's not great, but hey, I've got a cell phone. I've got a smartphone. Yeah, I can't get it repaired. I don't have right to repair, and I have to replace it every 2 years, and the prices are very, very high, but at least I have a cool cell phone, and I can afford it. It's not easy, but I can afford it. But if you stop the trade with Asia, where the workers who assemble that phone are paid $1 an hour, and you bring it back to the United States, where workers might get paid $20, $25 an hour, I won't be able to afford that phone. I think that's part of why we're so afraid of change. And it's tragic because we must change what we're doing. 240-242-5646. Not getting the calls, guys. Come on. I want to hear from you. And if I don't hear from you because you're not watching live, let me know. I've gotten a couple nice comments from Liz. Chimed in. She responded. She liked what I was saying about the WNBA. Love the WNBA. So Liz, thank you for that comment. And again, Kristen had some suggestions for me. I'm not sure I'm going to exactly follow them, but I did appreciate, I always appreciate suggestions. Even if I don't follow them, even if I don't do what you ask me to do or do what you tell me to do, I'm still grateful for the advice. I used to tell Jeff I appreciated his thoughtful support, but the problem was he wouldn't respond. He didn't view this as a community center where we're all have some responsibility for solutions. He only saw it, at least the way he responded to me, it became clear to me his only concern was to try to, if at all possible, embarrass me and stop any suggestions I might have from gaining traction. So that's not going to work. Remember, it has to be a two-way street. Over $1 billion. I mentioned this before. Largest, most complicated marine claims I can think of. And you know, it's ironic in a way, because if you go back to, well, there's a movie, On the Waterfront, which was, by the way, considered a great movie. It is a very powerful movie. The acting is good, very good. But it's really a union busting movie. The guy who made it, Elia Kazan, was a guy who named names. He was a communist, anti-communist guy. He spoke to the House on Un-American Affairs Committee, and he made a movie that portrayed unions as unalterably corrupt, and that union bosses were the real enemies of working people, not the business owners. And I'm not saying business owners are always the enemy of workers either, but their interests often do collide with workers. So I'm not saying the book by Kazan or the movie by Kazan is wrong, but I think it's important to understand it is propaganda. It's anti-labor propaganda. It's anti-labor union propaganda. And I have a problem with that, because I like workers. I like, and let me say it differently. I like unions. I believe unions are critical to protecting workers. That said, yes, oftentimes, there's no question about it, union leaders become corrupted by their influence, their power. They start to get working with politicians and other elites and influencers, and they like it. They like that a hell of a lot better than working in a factory. It's a big problem. It's a big problem, no question about it. It's ironic to me, though, somewhat ironic, that we have this, perhaps the worst maritime disaster ever, at least commercial maritime disaster, certainly not necessarily in terms of death. I mean, many more people killed, ferries going down, thousands of people dead. So that's worse from a human standpoint. But from a dollar standpoint, this being perhaps the worst in commercial history, is ironic in a way, because the docks were much more important to the lifeblood of many American cities in the 20th century. So many workers, longshore workers and the like, even though we were not running major trade deficits. In fact, we were often running trade surpluses, but we were still obviously a maritime country in many ways. Now, because we have become so dependent on imports, and because each one of these ships is so enormously large, the potential harm that can be caused is greater in one collision, in one accident. Back in the 30s, 50s, 60s, you'd have many more ships. They wouldn't be so big. Sure, there could be tragedies, collisions, harbor fires, but this scale is unmatched because of the size of the ship, because of the enormity of the trade that this ship represents. And that's globalism. If we were getting our goods and products from all over the place, not just from one source, you wouldn't have such a big ship. You'd have some coming in from Mexico, from Florida, from Canada. Not everything from Malaysia where they're assembling electronic goods. We got to change, or we're going to have more of these. And they're going to be as costly or even costlier. Situation in Israel is horrible. It's so bad. It's so bad that it almost gives one maybe hope that U.S. lawmakers and the president will actually do something, will actually say no, enough. I'm not saying it'll happen. I'm not even optimistic, not in the least. But I guess you could say that Israel has engaged in such ugly and atrocious behavior that policymakers simply cannot ignore it anymore. At least that's what we hope. So I wanted to get into this with the New York Times just a little bit. We'll play a clip from Morning Joe and briefly. And I'll explain why none of this makes me inclined to support Joe Biden for president. But I thought the way the New York Times chose to frame this is very interesting. And again, it really does display how biased it is in favor of Israel. And its interests are with Israel because the people who advertise the New York Times support Israel. The people who subscribe to the New York Times are by and large pro-Israel. So they don't tell you the truth. Tragic gaps in choosing targets. So look at how they say it. Pinpoint precision. Look at how great that Israeli military is. But in Gaza, they killed 7 aid workers. So that's the terrible, terrible latest atrocity by Israel. 7 aid workers. But, I mean, again, proportionality. 7 aid workers is awful. Those people were there to help. And yet, Israel's already killed over 30,000 people, 30,000 Gazans. So never lose sight of that. Never lose sight of that. That is the ultimate atrocity. That is the ultimate war crime that Israel's committed, and it continues to commit, is targeting, without question, targeting. And they say accidental. Ain't accidental. As the Times even acknowledges, they call it accidental. It's not accidental. It's predictable. If something is predictable, it's not an accident. It's a predictable result of a shoot-first style. So they know they're going to kill people. They know they're going to kill innocent people, and they don't care. It's not an accident. It's deliberate. It is genocide. Israel is using the Hamas attack as a pretext to kill Gazans, to eradicate Gaza. That is what is happening. And our government has been fully, completely supportive. Right, here's Morning Joe. I want to play this clip for you a little bit. I haven't really watched all of it. I may or may not. I always interrupt them, but I did want to at least start this because it does appear. Remember, Biden's wrung his hands. We heard Cenk say, I think very accurately, that you know what you're going to get with Biden. He'll wring his hands, he'll complain, and he'll do nothing about it. The most you'll ever get from him is an abstention on a meaningless UN vote. Right? That's the most we can expect from Joe Biden. And then Cenk saying, hey, maybe with Trump, maybe when he says you can't do that, when he was talking about bombing residences, maybe he'll do something. I doubt it, and I'm not. But it doesn't matter. You can't be worse than Biden's been on this issue. You can't be worse. Here's MSNBC.
And our top story this morning, amid growing tensions over the war in Gaza, President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are expected to speak by phone today. This will be their first direct communication since the Israeli airstrike that killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers. Earlier this week, Biden expressed some of his strongest criticism of Israel to date, saying he was outraged and heartbroken by those deaths. Biden and Netanyahu last spoke on March 18th when the president warned the prime minister against carrying out a military offensive in the southern city of Rafah. Meanwhile, World Central Kitchen founder Jose Andres is calling for an investigation into what he says was a deliberate attack on his organization's workers. Speaking on camera yesterday for the first time since the airstrike, Andres said the Israeli government's claim that the blast was accidental.
He was rejected.
He rejected that.
They were.
I don't want to just stop it. I'm going to play this in a moment, but I find Andres so much more credible. Remember, the New York Times said that it's an accident. It's a tragic accident. Yeah, it was predictable because of the Israel's shoot first style. But they probably weren't targeting these aid workers. That's a load of crap. We've seen Israel target journalists. We've seen them target other aid workers. They don't want people helping Palestinians. They don't want Palestinians to live.
Systematically, car by car, because they were not successful in hitting, they keep trying. This happened over more than 1.5, 1.8 kilometers. So this was not just bad luck.
It wasn't one bomb. It wasn't one shooting, machine gunning that happened to get all of them. They were all right by each other. The aid workers. Andres is saying, hey, we had our aid workers, we had our central kitchen folks strategically placed kilometers apart, and they were all targeted and they were all murdered by Israel, by the IDF. So there's no way to look at this except as a moral atrocity, as a crime, as murder. That the Israeli Defense Forces, that the soldiers of the IDF, that Netanyahu are committing. Joe Biden cannot continue to be our president. Not that Trump should be, but Joe Biden is complicit in this. Now we'll wait to hear. Tomorrow the news, and I'll let you know what, and you'll know yourself. But I'll discuss whatever Biden is reported to have said to Netanyahu in the response. But up until 2 days ago, Biden was pushing Congress to authorize more aid to Israel. That's who he is. That's who Joe Biden is. 2 days ago, pushing for more aid to Israel. And as far as I know, he hasn't yet said we've got to stop providing military weaponry to this genocidal country.
Where, we dropped the bomb in the wrong place, or no. Every country, obviously, that nationals, including the United States, that had nationals that died on this attack, we need to have an investigation that is neutral. Humanitarians and civilians should never be paying the consequences of war.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. They've been paying the consequences of this war. And by the way, the war in Ukraine as well, which I've been consistently telling you, terrible, terrible mistake for us to support, to promote. I understand you want to show Putin. I don't know how many Ukrainians you're prepared to sacrifice. Show Putin. I'm not. No. From the Washington Post, just wanted to get into this. This is from 2 days ago. Again, 2 days ago, the New York Times was reporting that Joe Biden was pushing Congress to quickly authorize more military aid. So 2 days ago in the Washington Post, they go through it. And this is why I don't care what Joe Biden says to Netanyahu. I won't support him for president. I won't vote for him. I won't ask other people. I would never ask others to vote for him. The only person you should be considering voting for is Jill Stein. The only one. RFK Jr. is as bad as Biden and Trump, certainly on this issue, and he's terrible on many other issues. He's not credible. I like what Cornel West has done in his lifetime. He has fought for justice, but he has really fallen far since he decided to run this for president. Jill Stein's the only credible candidate. So this is from the Washington Post article, and a lot of times when I show you the the newspaper stories, I cut out some of the imagery, the pictures. This is important because the tank shell that soldier is carrying is a U.S., right? These are U.S. weapons that they're using to kill Gazans. There's no way you can support Biden. I understand Trump. That's what the corporate elites, that's what the Democratic elites, they make someone so evil, so dark. They pray, and Trump makes it easy to do that you're willing to support somebody who's as bad or almost as bad, rather than demand real change. And this is kind of how Bernie got defeated. There was this fear, oh no, Bernie will lose to Trump. When in fact, Bernie was stronger than Trump. Bernie would have beaten Trump, unlike Hillary. Since October 7, Biden administration made public two major military sales. By the way, neither of these had to go through Congress. It was just signed off on by the president. Tank cartridges and equipment and artillery shells. You saw that picture. So $250 million right there. Tax money, our tax money being used to enrich Lockheed Martin, to enrich the weapons manufacturers whose stock, I'm sure, has risen. Haven't really followed that. And kill Palestinians, innocent Palestinian children. That's not it, right? $250 million sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? Only a small portion of the total supplies we've given Israel. Over 100 other transactions that include precision-guided munitions, bombs, bunker buster rockets. I think that's like, those bunker busters are awful. They have those little sort of shells that just go through everything. Forget what they call that stuff. It's just so destructive and harmful. It's like depleted uranium, right? It's like some sort of nuclear weaponry, right? Small bore nuclear weaponry are those bunker busters. So that's what we're doing. We're complicit. And there's more. Also bombs. So we talk about artillery shells, the nuclear weaponry, the so-called bunker busters. Also those big bombs, right? Trump was saying, we see those bombs. We can't see it. Trump says we can't see it, meaning keep it off the news, which, by the way, is Israel's doing also, right? Israel has now shut Al Jazeera out of Israel. Shut Al Jazeera. I guess they're trying to keep him out of Gaza too. I'm not sure if they've been able to do that. But you can't find Al Jazeera in Israel anymore because that independent news is just too painful for even Israelis to see. So you can't get it in Israel anymore. The bombs, which I guess is what Trump wanted, right? People don't want to see that. We don't want to show them that. The bombs that we see dropped on residential buildings. A lot of those are from the United States too, and that, you know, Biden's approved. So I can't endorse. I mean, what he's done is so bad that you can't. I don't see how you can. You know, at some point you say, well, there's just no way. A depleted uranium in some bunker busters, right? So that's what we're doing. No, we're turning Gaza into a Chernobyl, into a death zone. All right, I'm going to go. I want to just find one more thing here, because I did mention the Al Jazeera Israel, and I'm wondering, is it, yeah, Netanyahu vows to shut down Al Jazeera's operations in Israel. Not clear whether that he'll be able to keep them out of Gaza. My guess is that will be difficult. But let me just show this really, really, really quick. This headline from 1 day, 1 hour, right? 1 hour ago. This is why Israel is shutting down, to the extent it possibly can, Al Jazeera. There you go. Death toll tops 33,000. If you want to do something about that, don't vote for Joe Biden for president. Don't vote, well, vote uncommitted, but in the end, don't vote for Joe Biden for president. Only when Democrats know that the price that they will lose power, that their ability to recruit you to vote for them is limited, that at some point you will say no. Complicity in genocide, that should be that point. If you haven't reached it already, I hope you've reached it now. I'll be back tomorrow, free for all. Love to talk to you. Don't forget, 240-242-5646, and please comment if you're not going to call me.